Hi everyone, I'm Carol Ann Riddell and welcome to Arts in the City. First up, show business is risky business. And through the years, women had to be especially creative in order to succeed. They changed laws, social norms, even banking. Our Donna Hanover stops by the New York Historical for a new exhibit on women in New York City's theater.
Let me entertain you, and we'll have a real good time.
Women making theater in New York have produced dazzling work.
Me too. Sure.
But from the beginning, they've often had to think outside the box to keep their careers going. At the New York Historical, one exhibit looks at some of the first women who made a splash in New York theater. Jean Gutierrez is the curator.
It's an exploration of their economic survival in a very, very challenging industry. Until 1848 in New York, if you were a married woman, you didn't have control over your finances, your earnings.
Charlotte Cushman, who was born in 1816, was an actress who did not marry. After working in theaters around America, she went to London in the 1840s.
She was joined by her sister, and the two of them made an enormous success out of Romeo and Juliet, and she played Romeo. So she became known for her so-called breeches roles, where she portrayed men.
Cushman then acted in both Europe and the U.S., attaining huge status.
One of the first celebrities of American theater. She was able to really dine out on that for a lot of her career. She would be paid for these exclusive poses, and then the photographers could make money off her celebrity by selling these little prints.
Many also believe that one of New York's great sculptures was done with Cushman as the inspiration.
That's the Angel of the Waters Bethesda fountain across the street from us in Central Park. Her partner, Emma Stebbins, sculpted that.
Another actress highlighted is Maude Adams. As a young actress, she caught the attention of author J.M. Barrie, who wrote about the boy who wouldn't grow up.
When Peter Pan was adapted to the stage, she was the Broadway Peter Pan for thousands of performances over many, many years. Maude Adams was reportedly the highest paid actress in the United States at that time.
How much money was she making?
Up to $20,000 a month.
But Maude Adams did more than act.
She pivoted to working in almost technology. She partnered with Eastman Kodak. She partnered with General Electric. She was hoping to make the lights stronger, more focused, and also safer, because that was definitely a hazard of these 19th century theaters, was they would burn down with great regularity. There's a wonderful photograph right here of her with a 30,000 watt light bulb, and she was listed as the lead inventor on the patent.
One of the fascinating performers featured here in this exhibit is Laura Keene. Laura Keene was actually on stage at Ford's Theater when President Lincoln was shot.
Earlier, she had expanded from acting to include theater management.
She had one of her great hits, which was called Our American Cousin. She paid the playwright for exclusive rights to the play. Our American Cousin was the play that President Abraham Lincoln was watching when he was assassinated, and Laura Keene was on stage when the assassination took place.
Anita Bush was a black actress who started as a dancer in minstrel shows where both white and black actors wore blackface.
She decided she would start her own stock company, a theatrical troupe, that would bring theater that wasn't minstrelsy to an African-American audience and give them the ability to see themselves on stage in a way that wasn't offensive.
Then she pivoted and started doing movies, including a Western called The Crimson Skull.
It starred an all-black cast, and she was the female lead. There she is in her cowboy hat.
The exhibit at the New York Historical jumps to the vibrant downtown theater scene starting in the 1960s, and it showcases two theaters still going strong today thanks to the women behind them. One is La Mama.
The founder was a woman named Ellen Stewart. It was very unusual for a black woman to be in charge of something like this, and a couple of times the police were sure she must be running a brothel. Ellen Stewart was able to buy her own building. Using grants from the Rockefeller and Ford Foundations, That took the pressure off of playwrights and actors. They didn't have to worry about being commercially successful. They could work on what interested them. And if it was radical, if it was transgressive, if it was sexy, if it was queer, that was something that they could do in this space.
And then there is the WOW Cafe, which grew out of the Women's One World festivals.
It is an all-volunteer operation. It's run on sweat equity, and so anyone who wants to come and put in the work can also put on a show. This costume is part of the Five Lesbian Brothers show called Brave Smiles, another lesbian tragedy that takes the history of lesbian portrayal in film and in literature and pushes it past satire until it's funny.
So looking back at 200 years of women making theater in New York, what would Jean like people to know?
I'd really like for them to take away that women in theater have to be extremely clever, and they have to be adaptable, and they have to be flexible. And I hope that they'll get some respect for that.
I'm Donna Hanover for Arts in the City.
Next, we take a step way back in time. Andrew Falzone heads to the American Museum of Natural History for a new exhibit that explores the before and after story that led to the end of the dinosaurs.
It was a major turning point in Earth's history, 66 million years ago. A single event that altered the prehistoric landscape. At the American Museum of Natural History, a new exhibit called Impact: The End of the Age of Dinosaurs takes visitors straight to that moment of impact and then walks them through what came next.
We wanted to include the asteroid impact itself, the evidence for that impact, not just the evidence that the impact happened, but the evidence of the physical consequences of that impact.
Behind me are Mosasaurus and Plesiosaurus, and while most of the exhibits here at Natural History focus on the animals, this exhibit is different. It focuses on an event, and that changes how the scientists behind the exhibit tell the story. The exhibit is built around that impact moment, but it's really about what scientists can prove, the evidence that the strike happened and the evidence of what it did to Earth.
So how do we know, for example, that re-entering material that was sprayed up into the upper atmosphere and out of the atmosphere by the impact, as it re-entered, that it heated the Earth to 700 degrees C in the upper atmosphere, causing global wildfires?
With impact, the story doesn't end with extinction, it follows the reset, how ecosystems recover and how mammals begin to expand into the space left behind. The deeper you go, the further forward you move in time from the late Cretaceous period into the worlds that came after.
So that you start before this impact event, and you're thoroughly immersed in the late Cretaceous period. You come into this impact event, and then you also move through time.
That move through time approach doesn't leave the story in the distant past. It brings it into the present. What we've learned from impacts, how scientists watch the sky today, and what it might take to prevent another catastrophic strike.
We're watching the skies, and in fact, there's an interactive, you can try your hand at to see, are there ways that we have of deflecting meteorites, in theory or at least a little in practice.
But the asteroid wasn't the only time Earth was rocked by catastrophic change. Scientists say it's happened before, and it could happen again.
We know of at least 5 major events that reshaped the planet and the life on the planet.
In fact, it could be happening right now. We don't need an asteroid to trigger massive loss. Some scientists argue we are already living through a 6th mass extinction event. And while there's debate about whether or not it's actually underway, there are clear warning signs. The threats to biodiversity today are already here on Earth, and what happens next is still something we can influence.
The bad news is we don't need a meteorite to drive biodiversity loss. We can do that ourselves. But there's also, just as we're part of the problem, we're part of the solution.
There's no question. We're losing species, we're losing habitats. With the loss of habitat comes with the loss of species. I think recognizing that this could happen is one of the lessons of the exhibit.
The takeaway is bigger than any dinosaur. bigger than the exhibit's life-size Triceratops or full-sized model of a Paraceratherium, which is the largest land mammal to ever live. Impact is a reminder that Earth can change dramatically, and that in our time, the direction and speed of that change is something we're helping right today.
Among all that, I want them to know that we live on a changing planet. Sometimes that change is slow, sometimes it's incredibly fast, but we should expect it to change in the future. And you know, it may well be changing rapidly today in light of human activities, but there are things potentially that we can do about that.
If you want to check out Impact, the End of the Age of Dinosaurs, you have until January 2027. That's when this exhibit goes extinct. I'm Andrew Falzone for Arts in the City.
Combining global cuisine and pottery for a lesson in creativity. We visited Kingsborough Community College for a unique class focused on delicious collaboration.
Almost 11:30. Rice takes a while to cook, so let's get that going, please.
Professor Mark D'Alessandro is serving up more than you might expect in a college classroom, a global food and pottery project where culinary arts and fine arts sit at the same table.
So the culinary arts students are preparing recipes that they have researched throughout the entire semester, and they're presenting it on pottery that the fine arts students have also been working on the entire semester.
The goal for students to find and make recipes with a history of ceramic arts tradition, culminating in a lunch buffet featuring both food and pottery.
So you're going to do research. You're going to figure out where these dishes come from, where the cultures are from, what history is behind it. So there's a little bit of sociology, a little bit of anthropology, a little bit of fine art, and a little bit of culinary arts that all comes together, tactile way to see both groups of students putting one product together right in front of you.
There were challenges that they presented for themselves. It was a really fruitful experience, if I can use that word. It was really nice to see, and they got very excited about it.
For some of the students, the project was a chance to dig into family culture.
I chose rice and peas, which is the Jamaican dish. My background, my dad's family, they're Jamaican, so that's something that I've been eating since I was a child. I want to learn how to make more food of my own culture, so that's part of the reason why I'm going into the culinary program here. Because when I do venture out on my own, I want to do a fusion of Southern and Jamaican foods, because that's both my background is Southern and Jamaican. So I want to, you know, give back to my culture in that way.
Today we're focusing on Korean food, so we're doing a kimchi stew and a seafood pancake. I'm half Korean, so a lot of these foods were served to me by my grandmother, and I kind of wanted to honor her in that kind of way.
Part of the lesson Mark hoped to impart.
I've always said to students, I want you to bring you to culinary school. If you're from a certain area where the food is very emblematic of that area, that culture, that country, don't turn that off when you become a chef, even if you're cooking different food. This is a time to celebrate that. So I have some students that have chosen their own cultures, and that's what they're going to represent. You'll see there's some students that have chosen other cultures. And I think that's, again, where learning comes in.
Mark says he hopes to do more cross-collaborations with his students, highlighting the intersection of food and art, a feast in more ways than one. Vince Giordano is a Grammy winner, New Yorker, and musician who has played in the city's nightclubs and scored films. Our Neil Rosen caught up with this expert in all things jazz before his set at the Birdland Jazz Club.
It ain't no chalk, no pigeon wing, man, it's easy to do. Call shake that thing, oh, shake that thing. Ah, shake that thing. I'm getting tired of telling you to shake that thing. Shake it, boys.
For many decades, band leader and musical historian extraordinaire, Vince Giordano has been keeping the sounds of the 1920s and 30s alive with his swinging orchestra, Vince Giordano and the Nighthawks. Performing vintage hot jazz and rare arrangements exactly the way it was played a century ago, they could be seen and heard regularly in person at the legendary New York jazz club Birdland. It's there that they play music from such greats as Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Louis Armstrong, and Benny Goodman, just to name a few. And nobody makes the musical past come alive better than Vince and his Nighthawks band.
How did you get into this, Vince?
My big influence was coming home and when I was a young person and watching the old cartoons and Hal Roach comedies, the Laurel and Hardy, Our Gang, and then going to my grandmother's place in Brooklyn, where she had an old wind-up Victrola from the 20s, and that was the music that really got me going, and I was very much influenced by that.
Was it hard to get this off the ground when music tastes were different when you started doing this?
Yeah, I had a lot of naysayers. You know, people said, you know, you want to, first of all, put a big band together and you want to put a vintage big band together, you'll never get anywhere with that. I said, okay. But I just put on my blinders and went for it. The big band is something that has introductions, it has key changes, we play verses, then choruses, and tricky endings and hot solos, and it's not the same thing over and over again. It's got a great mix to it, and the secret is the arrangements.
How did you get a hold of the arrangements? You have 60,000 arrangements?
60,000 arrangements. It's a kind of a long, crazy story. I used to write to the families of older musicians who had passed away, and wrote this nice little letter, and they said, please come and get this stuff out of here, or we can make a deal, or too late, the stuff was thrown out, or we want $1 million. And I also used to advertise in the Musicians Union, which these old guys were just so happy that to get rid of their library.
You've probably heard Vince's music before, even if you didn't realize it. He's done the musical soundtrack for many recent re-releases of Laurel and Hardy and Buster Keaton's silent films. He's done the score for dozens of movies, like The Cotton Club, The Irishman, and many Woody Allen films, like Bullets Over Broadway. And you could even see Vince on screen in the Martin Scorsese film, The Aviator.
I've got those happy feet, give them a low-down beat, and they begin.
His music has also been featured extensively on television, in such acclaimed shows as The Nick and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Plus, his scoring of the hit series Boardwalk Empire even earned Vince a Grammy Award.
Have you turned some young people on, new generations, to this kind of stuff?
Yes, I really feel that there's, at least in the music world, there's like a renaissance. There's a lot of younger musicians who I wish were around when I was starting, like close to 50 years ago, and they are picking up on this great traditions of the 1920s and 30s, and even going down to wearing certain clothes and things like that, and they're really getting into it. It's so old that it's new again. They could be cool and hip with it. I've always maintained that the music that I play is timeless. It made people happy back then, it makes people happy today.
You could see Vince Giordano and the Nighthawk Orchestra every Monday and Tuesday at Birdland at 315 West 44th Street. For more information, go to Vince's website at vincegiordano.com. For Arts in the City, I'm Neil Rosen.
Since 1973, the United States Postal Service has issued a Love Stamp, a series featuring romantic themes with artwork that changes each year. Vivian Lee sat down with the creator behind this year's designs.
It's one of those things that you're not expecting to get it, if you know what I mean. It's like, well, it's a fine career if I don't get one. And if I get a chance to do it, that's great. So it was exciting.
James Yang actually got to create the art for 4 postage stamps. Each of them shows birds and hearts inspired by mid-century design. It all started with a call from Postal Service Art Director Ethel Kessler.
She goes, "You're a concept guy. We normally do hearts and birds. So try to think of some ideas that aren't that." And we're commissioning one stamp. So I did a bunch of ideas, and at the last second, since I've been doing this long enough, I was like, you know what? I better just throw in birds and hearts just to play it safe. And then, of course, when I turned them in, they were like, "Oh, we want you to follow up on the birds and hearts idea."
Before the Love Stamp commission, Yang's art was already on the cultural landscape. If you've ever taken the New York City subway, you might have experienced his eye-catching wallpaper.
And I was thinking, well, can I create an image where someone's coming in really super hectic, you know, maybe somebody on rush hour, and they're stuck because there's no seat, and they have to sit there and look up and around their environment. And I was thinking, well, what kind of environment could I create that might just sort of calm people down for a little bit, maybe make them feel a little bit chilled out.
And his illustrations have appeared in numerous magazines and their covers, as well as in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the New York Times, who called his work visual refreshment. Yang also created this public service announcement about bystander intervention during the pandemic as attacks against Asian Americans spiked across the country. Yang has also been awarded a number of prestigious honors for authors and illustrators of children's books, back in 2020 for StopBot.
This is probably the book that really kind of changed my career. So it won the Dr. Seuss Geisel Award for the best young reader's book.
Yes, that Dr. Seuss. Yang's next book, A Boy Named Isamu, a story of Isamu Noguchi, won the 2022 Asian Pacific American Library Association's Picture Book honor. It's an imagining of the late American sculptor, landscape architect, and iconic modernist.
Noguchi's half Japanese, half American, so when he was in the US, he never felt American enough. And then when his mom, who was amazing, this is 1904, took him back to Japan, didn't feel Japanese enough. So he retreated back to, he actually retreated to nature just to kind of find himself.
Born and raised in Oklahoma, Yang gravitated to art as a child. His father was a scientist whose own father, Dal-suk Yang, was an artist of some renown in Korea.
Around 2nd or 3rd grade, the art teacher called my parents in for a meeting. They think it's because I'm talking too much in class or whatever. So they're ready to give it to me after they hear what's going on. And then like the teacher goes, "Well, I can't teach your son art." And they're like, well, we'll punish him. We'll make sure that he can. Not a problem, right? And she's like, no, you don't understand. He already knows more than I do.
Yang recalls his parents once worried about his future, just as he was about to begin his studies in the fine arts program at Virginia Commonwealth University.
Mom's from a business family. She's like, you can't send him to art school. He's going to be poor. He's going to be a pauper and on the street. We can't do this. And my dad, on his side of the family, my grandfather is a famous artist. So he's like, no, our son's going to art school. He's going to be fine, and he's going to be famous. End of discussion. And then he just stormed out of the room, and I go, "Thanks a lot, Dad." And he just looked at me and goes, "You better be famous."
Fame has something to do with Yang's other books. A Universe Big and Small is a story about astronomer Carl Sagan. And Charles Ray, Designers at Play, is a story of the modernist designers Charles and Ray Eames. Altogether, his work conveys how art and science and childlike wonder have intersected in Yang's life, qualities that translate even through an itty-bitty forever stamp. For Arts in the City, I'm Vivian Lee.
Andrew Lloyd Webber's The Phantom of the Opera tells the sweeping love story between a musical genius and a young soprano. Now that classic is reimagined as a fully immersive experience. Patrick Pacheco, host of CUNY TV's Theater, All the Moving Parts, sits down with 3 of the production stars to talk about bringing this new vision to life.
Inspired by The Phantom of the Opera, inviting audiences to step inside the musical itself, masked, dressed for the occasion, and surrounded by music and enshrouded in mystery. Joining me are Telly Leung, Hailey Ferrier, and Francisco Javier Gonzalez, who star in this bold new take on a legendary story.
It's called Masquerade, and it's not called Phantom of the Opera because it's its own artistic piece in itself. And it was always Diane's concept that Masquerade would be told through the Phantom's mind, the Phantom's point of view, that he has invited everybody to come and see his retelling of the story that ran on Broadway at the Majestic for 35 years and at productions all over the world. That separation that usually exists with traditional theater, where we're on this side doing the show and they're on the other side of the proscenium watching the show. There is no watching the show here. Yeah. And it's a really, it's sort of as very challenging to do a show this way, of course, but it's also opened up a world of possibilities, especially when it comes to engaging an audience, especially when it comes to how we light spaces, how we perform close-up magic in spaces like this where there's no place to hide, you know. So it's been fun.
Hailey, you've mentioned, obviously, that you think of this as a coming-of-age tale for Christine.
Yeah.
And for every young woman, she's often pivoted between the bad boy and the erotic attraction of a bad boy and whatever that addresses in terms of your needs and wants versus the good but maybe a little more boring guy, right?
Yeah.
How does Christine sort that out?
You were talking about the sexual nature of it, and I think there is, you don't get to see it a lot when she's interacting with the boys because of the era, but there's an unspoken sexual tension that is kind of just bubbling when I'm having interactions with either of them. I'd say there's only one moment in the show where you're actually in Christine's mind and you're alone with her and it's not the Phantom's POV. And you get to see her explore that a little. But other than that, she's pretty buttoned up because of the time period. So I'd say a lot of my show is figuring out my wants and my needs and if either of them can meet that. And by the end, he's pulling me to safety, but I also realize he doesn't know what I've wanted and he might not even know me as a full realized woman. I might not even know myself as a full realized woman. I think at the end of my show, Christine's taking time to herself. and she's kind of retreating and figuring out what her wants are without the influence of her father or the men that kind of act as her father figures since he's not in her life anymore.
Poor Raoul has often gotten the rap of being this white boy cipher, right? But I have to tell you that you're the hottest Raoul I've seen after having seen, you know, Phantom of the Opera quite a number of times. You've been able to inject some fire into that performance. Is that your Cuban-born or Cuban-American Latinidad?
Yes, I think so. You know, I base my performance on the novels more than anything else. I actually didn't see the Broadway show, and I veered away from allowing the film to inform me either.
Then say you'll share with me one love, one lifetime. Let me lead you from your solitude.
I wanted my own take on it, and sure, yeah, I feel like I brought a lot of myself to him in ways and pushed to the extremes, and I really did the best I could to find the layers that were there.
To hear more from our conversation about Masquerade, be sure to watch the full episode of Theater All the Moving Parts, airing on CUNY TV and available on YouTube.
That is our show for today. Thanks so much for joining us. A quick reminder to check us out on social media. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Carol Ann Riddell. We'll see you next time on Arts in the City. To support your favorite programming here at CUNY TV, please consider donating at tv.cuny.edu/donate.